Greetings, chess players. My name is Chris Torres, and this is my daily chess musing for February 5th, 2021. For today's episode, I present an absolutely brilliant puzzle as a tribute to the great chess problem composer, Mikhail Zinar, whom today, it was announced, has died. In my humble opinion, the two endgame steady composers who mastered the pawn better than all the rest in history are Nikolai Grigoriev and Mikhail Zinar. And now, as partial proof to this assertion, I present a puzzle by Mikhail Zinar, first published in 1983. Enjoy. So this is the starting position for my favorite study by Mikhail Zinar. Normally, I would put a clock on a position and give you a certain amount of time to come up with the correct solution. However, this puzzle is so unbelievably complicated that it is virtually unsolvable. So instead of placing the clock, we are going to look at the solution together. White must begin with one f7 to be victorious. Promoting to the queen immediately fails because rook takes c8, dx c8 can equal a queen again. Then rook to h8, threatening to play rook takes h5. The bishop blocks on h3, and then rook takes h3 mate. Queen takes e8, defending h5. But then rook takes e8, bishop c1, rook h8 again, still with the same threats. e8 equals queen, rook takes e8, and black can keep doing that all day. e7, rook goes back to h8, e8 equals queen, rook takes e8, f7, rook to h8. White could try bishop takes f4 to pull the black's king away from g3, but king takes f4, e6, rook takes h5 check, bishop h3, and rook takes h3 is still mate. After bishop takes f4 check, king takes f4. White could try f8 equals queen, check, but rook takes f8. Bishop d3, rook h8, bishop g6. Stops one threat, but allows f1 to promote to a queen check, king h2, and then queen g2 mate. White must start with one f7 and not promote to a queen immediately. Black's best move is rook h8, threatening rook takes h5, obviously. Fx e8, promoting to a bishop. White must promote to a bishop to defend h5, because if they promote to a queen, then black has rook a1 and is threatening checkmates with both rooks along either a rank or a file. Bishop takes a1 is forced to stop rook takes f1 mate. But then rook takes h5 check, queen takes h5 is again forced to stop the mate following bishop h3, and then rook takes h3. But now black has no legal moves, so it is a stalemate. So again, white must start with f7. Rook h8 is black's best move. And then fx e8, promoting to a bishop. Rook ax e8 is black's best move, as rook takes h5 check, bishop takes h5, rook h8, and then e8 promoting to a bishop to once again avoid the stalemate is a really odd looking position, but easily winning for white. So after rook ax e8, then white plays dx e8, promoting to a bishop. White must defend h5 to prevent checkmate, but promoting to a queen leads to that stalemate. For example, dx e8 equals queen, rook takes h5 check, and queen takes h5 stalemate. So far we have f7 as white's first move, rook h8, fx e8, promoting to a bishop, rook ax is e8, dx is e8, promoting to a bishop again. Rook takes e8. And now bishop d4. The bishop stays on the diagonal with h8 and threatens f2. As you will soon see, doing both is necessary for white to win. Rook h8, threatening mate with rook takes h5, bishop h3, and then rook takes h3 mate. e8, promoting to a bishop, stops the mate and avoids the stalemate. Again, promoting to a queen leads to a draw. Rook takes e8, and then white's sixth move is e7, clearing the way for the e5 pawn to move forward. Rook goes to h8 again. Pawn goes to e8, promoting to a bishop, and repeat. Rook takes e8. White's eighth move is pawn to e6. And finally, the bishop has an unobstructed path to h8. This means that black can move to any safe 8th rank square to prevent white from promoting the c-pawn into a queen, but can no longer threaten mate by moving to h8. Rook to f8, as good a choice as any of the alternative safe 8th rank moves. 9e7. And e7 was the correct reply to those other rook to anything 8 moves. 9, rook f5. If again the rook moves to any safe 8th rank square, then say rook a8, white can play h6, rook e8, bishop b2, rook g8, bishop g7, rook a8, h7, and black will be forced to part ways with the rook after white plays h8 equals queen. A fascinating sub-variation would be after 9, r8, h6, rook e8, bishop b2, and then king h4 is really interesting because white can play h7, g3, and things get really complicated. h8 equals queen, rook takes h8, bishop takes h8, g2 check, bishop takes g2, fx g2 check, king takes g2, f1 promoting to a queen, check, king takes f1. So when the dust settles, white wins easily. So let's return to the main solution and review where we are in it. We start with 1f7, then rook h8, f-pawn captures e8, promotes to a bishop, and rook a captures on e8. The d-pawn captures on e8 and promotes to a bishop. Then the rook takes e8 again, bishop d4, and then rook goes to h8 again, threatening mate. Pawn to e8, promoting to a bishop, and then rook takes e8. 6, e7, clearing the way for the e5 pawn to move forward. Rook goes back to h8. e8 promotes to a bishop, then rook takes e8, then e6, and then rook to 8 anything. 9, e7, 9, rook f5, pawn to e8, promoting to a bishop a 5th and final time. Again, to defend h5 while avoiding the stalemate. The alternative to under-promoting to the bishop would be bishop takes f2 check, and it seems like a tempting way to move black's king out of his threatening position. But king takes f2, e8 equals queen, g3. White has no good checks, and black is threatening mate again. Queen e1 check, king takes e1, c8 promotes to a queen, king takes f1. Queen takes f5 is a tempting capture, but black's 3 remaining pawns are superior to white's queen. For instance, g2 check, king h2, g1 promoting to a queen, king h3, and then queen g3 mate. Alternatively, instead of taking the rook, white could play queen c4 check, king f2, queen c2. Black could play king f1, and white needs to keep checking, but cannot make progress, so this will eventually draw by repetition. So the only winning move for white was, in fact, promoting a pawn to a bishop a 5th and final time. To which black can play anything short of sacrificing their rook, and white will be able to promote the c-pawn into a queen and win easily. Let's look at the whole solution one last time. f7, rook to h8, fx e8 promotes to a bishop, rook a captures on e8, d-pawn takes e8 promotes to a bishop, rook takes e8, Bishop d4. Rook h8. E-pawn scoots forward and promotes to a bishop. Rook takes e8. e7. Rook h8. E-pawn moves forward and promotes to a bishop again. Rook takes e8. e6. Rook to f8. e7. Rook f5. And finally, the pawn moves forward to e8, promoting to a bishop. Absolutely stunning. I hope you enjoyed this Zinar composition as much as I do. For more instructive puzzles like the one I just shared, please visit dailychessmusings.com. Have a question? Send them to dailychessmusings@gmail.com. Also be sure to check out the Daily Chess Musings Facebook page. Follow me on Twitter @TorresChess. Join our Daily Chess Musings Club on chess.com and peruse through all of our free chess lessons at dailychessmusings.com. And with that, I bid you adieu until tomorrow. But before you go, please remember to hit the like and subscribe buttons.